In 2009, Jamaica passed a law called the Sexual Offences Act that set up for the first time a sex offenders registry. Now, Jamaica's registry isn't open to the general public, and ever since we passed the law, that's over what now, 15 years, we've been talking and arguing about whether it should be made accessible to the general public. Well, that's our topic for this edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. Thanks so much for joining me. We're going to be hearing from the chairperson of Jamaicans for Justice and attorney at law, John Clark. Also with us, data privacy expert and attorney Chuck Cameron, joining us on Zoom from Trinidad and Tobago, attorney at law and activist Jonathan Bagan, and also with us on Zoom, Professor Opal Palmer Adisa, culturalist and gender specialist. Now, remember, we want to hear from you as well, so you can WhatsApp us. Our WhatsApp number, it's 876-2540693, 876-2540693. Give us your first name and your general location. Before we get into discussion, though, our boy Harriet has this overview.
It's been almost exactly 1 year since the brutal murder of 29-year-old school teacher Danielle Anglin. The man charged with her murder and who had reportedly confessed to the killing had previously been convicted of sex offenses in Antigua and Barbuda. He died after hanging himself in a lockup at the Portmore police station. Now, this is just one of many incidents that have led to appeals for the sex offenders registry to be made public. The advocates for a public registry believe that Jamaicans need to know about sex offenders living in their community or working in their office. The Sex Offender Registry is a system which legally requires individuals convicted of certain sexual offenses like non-consensual sexual acts, exploitation, or abuse to register and provide specific personal information that allows authorities to track their whereabouts. The registry includes the convict's name, address, details about the offense, as well as a requirement to report changes in residence and travel plans. A sex offender who violates the reporting requirements commits an offense and is liable to a fine of up to $1 million or 1 year imprisonment. The registry has been operational since July 2014 and it's managed by the Department of Correctional Services DCS in the Ministry of National Security and is accessible only to certain individuals and organizations with a legitimate interest. For example, law enforcement, professional counselors, and specific institutions where offenders might work or study. But is it time for this pool of people with access to be expanded?
It is unfortunate, but we aren't yet at a place where if this list is to be made public today, we can guarantee and say, all right, John Doe down the road who lives across neighbor X won't be gaslight and throw back a bomb and bomb up his house or mob him and kill him. We aren't there as yet.
Countries like the United States and Trinidad and Tobago, though, are already there. Their sex offenders registries are public and can be easily accessed online. Wayne Golding is an attorney in the U.S.
What we find with the registry is that because of the public safety aspect of it, informing the public seems to be the general consensus, where people feel that the public having knowledge of these folks and where they're located is the better of the two evils. On the flip side, these persons who are in the registry, of course, they're often, vilified beyond their conviction. They can't really get a fresh start. And frankly, some of them end up living under bridges because they cannot find a zone in which they're compliant to live. So you can also get notified once a person lives in your neighborhood. These persons are also required to register and not live in certain neighborhoods. For example, they can't live within a certain distance of a park, of a school.
Is a similar approach needed in Jamaica?
There are many documented instances where you have past offenders now becoming victims of whether it be house bombings. You actually have instances where persons have gone online, found persons, gone to their homes and killed them. In the US, And so there are documented instances of this. And so it's not a far-fetched thought that this type of behavior would be extremely prominent in Jamaica, especially appreciating our culture.
Notwithstanding, this was Prime Minister Andrew Holness earlier this week during a tour of Job Lane in St. Catherine, where 9-year-old Kelsey Farragon was raped and killed by a man who was out on bail after being charged for grievous bodily harm.
We do have in place a sex offenders registry, but I think this incident requires that we take a second look on how we make this sex offenders registry available to the public so that the public can be armed with information to protect themselves. Yes, there are constitutional issues that we have to balance, but where we are in the society, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that our laws need to favor the protection of life and the protection of the victim rather than trying to protect the criminals. It is time that the society draws a clear line that we must eliminate the criminals from our society. They mean you no good.
Could this change already be happening?
It is actually in the Ministry of National Security at DCS, and I know it's something that we are looking at this time. We have a new correctional policy, and we are looking at all the legislation to see how well we can amend those legislation. At this time, they only need to report to the police station. If someone's commit a crime like rape, you will not know if it's your neighbor, if the person who's next door to you. And I think that is something that should be looked at. The sex offender registry, of course, if it is that only certain people can access that registry at this time. But I do believe that us as citizens, we should have the right to know who is living beside us.
What's the sense of having a sex offenders registry if it's not open and available to the public at large, and the public education of how to access it, and to make sure that when there are sex offenders that are in communities, that the communities are advised of it rather than waiting until it's too late.
Would this change do more harm than good, or more good than harm?
Long-term and futuristic planning, I am for the list being made public, and I think that is very important to be noted. However, when we're having this conversation, it's important to appreciate the context within which our society operates. When an offender is now to be released into the public, sensitization must begin long before this release date. And so conversations need to be happening with public persons who are at different levels of the stakeholder hierarchy. You need to be engaging with the families who will be reintegrated with this offender. And conversations need to be happening with the offender himself. And so what you will find essentially is that there's a network around this offender.
Reporting for All Angles, I'm Amoy Harriet.
All right, just a reminder, our WhatsApp line is 25406938762 2540693. And before we even start discussion, there's something I have to make sure we're very, very clear on, because I find there's a lot of confusion around this issue. If somebody is on bail, if somebody has been alleged to have done something or accused of doing something, you cannot be put on the registry. That is for persons who have been convicted of a particular offense, all right? And I find a lot of the times when we have some of these tragic situations, the suggestion is that if the registry were public, it wouldn't have happened, when a lot of the times these are not people who have any convictions on sexual offenses, and therefore even if the registry were public, would not have been on the registry. So I just want to make that absolutely clear as we go into the discussion, all right? I think we are nearly at the break. So let's go to the break and then we'll come back and continue discussion. We'll soon come.